American soldiers contemptuously called it a grease gun and a tin can, while the Germans simply could not understand how this piece of wire could kill effectively. But it was this stamped tube that destroyed more elite fighters than all the beautiful submachine guns of the war combined. The M3 grease gun was not a legend, it was a disgrace to gunsmiths. It was a spit in the face of German engineering pride. While the Wehrmacht was playing design bureau, the Americans switched to assembly line stamping, which saved millions of dollars, but infuriated every soldier who held this miracle in his hands. This weapon was created as a disposable consumable, but against all logic, it became a symbol of survival. The paradox is that the creators of this trash should have been kicked out of the army in disgrace, but instead they were awarded medals. Now let's break down how the world reached the point where the ugliest weapon became the most effective. While Hollywood was showing movies with Thompsons, the US Army faced reality. That gun cost $200 and took longer to assemble than the average soldier lived on the front line. It was not a weapon, it was financial madness. In 1942, the Pentagon realized that its legendary submachine gun was golden antique. It required hours of handwork by craftsmen, and America did not have enough of them. The war demanded millions of barrels, not one-off masterpieces. Looking at the British Sten, which was stamped out for pennies, American generals understood. It was time to end aesthetics. To win in a global meat grinder, they had to stop producing weapons and start producing consumables. But who dared to take on the role of an armed saboteur and shift submachine gun production onto the rails of an automobile headlight factory? You will soon find out why this man hated classic rifles. George Hyde was not a gunsmith. He was an auto mechanic who was used to assembling truck headlights. When he was given the task of creating a submachine gun, he looked at his competitors' drawings and laughed in their faces. You people have all gone insane. This can simply be welded from a piece of metal, like a car fender. Hyde completely ignored the precision that drove other designers mad. He was not going to mill parts until they shone. He stamped them. 2 halves of a receiver, spot welding. And that was it. The tolerances were so crooked that any German inspector would have shot himself out of shame. Hyde was not making a weapon. He was creating an assembly line product that simply had to shoot, not pose in a museum. Spoiler, the first batch turned out to be such a brutal mass of defects that the military almost shut the whole shop down. What saved the project from total failure? The Germans were obsessed with filigree precision and complexity, turning a submachine gun into a piece of jewelry. Hyde was obsessed with cheapness and primitivism. When they met on the battlefield, it turned out that 450 rounds per minute from the American was not slow. It was a sentence for those accustomed to a furious rate of fire. Forget about a high rate of fire, it is a trap. In close combat, the primitive M3, with its slow recoil cycle, turned an ordinary conscript shaking with fear into a killing machine. The barrel did not jump into the sky after every shot, allowing even a novice to pour burst after burst into a window or doorway. This weapon did not require sniper skills. It required only cartridges and a pressed trigger. Simplicity was its main combat characteristic. And now, the paratroopers. How did this piece of iron behave when it was dropped by parachute straight onto the Germans' heads? And why did soldiers begin to value it more than expensive antique? Try dancing inside the cramped compartment of a burning Sherman when you have a long rifle hanging from your shoulder, catching on every lever. Didn't work? That is why tankers hated everything longer than a shovel handle and worshipped the grease gun. There is no free space in a tank at all. While other crews struggled with their bulky submachine guns, constantly risking snagging them on equipment and getting stuck inside a burning vehicle, tankers with the M3 felt safe. With its telescoping wire stock, the grease gun turned into a compact chunk of metal that did not interfere with operating the cannon and was always at hand. The photograph of Corporal Carlton Chapman clutching an M3 in a tank hatch is not propaganda, but a harsh fact. For them, it was not a weapon, but a spare part, as important as a size 22 wrench. But what if this tool still broke right in the middle of battle? In the forests of the Ardennes, soldiers found a solution that would have given any gunsmith a heart attack. The Ardennes, winter of 1944. Frost at -20. Elite Browning machine guns turn into blocks of ice, and soldiers are forced to literally urinate on the bolts to melt the grease and make them fire. And the M3, it keeps spitting lead as if it were in the tropics. The secret is simple. There is nothing in the grease gun that can freeze. Huge gaps between parts and a primitive design simply prevent ice or thick grease from stopping the mechanism. What the Germans called shameful negligence in production became the only chance of survival here. While the enemy's weapons surrendered to nature, the American infantrymen simply pulled the trigger. But even the toughest metal eventually starts falling apart under stress. What did soldiers do when their submachine gun turned into a pile of junk in the middle of an enemy forest? We move on to frontline garage tuning. If you want to see what real battlefield improvisation looks like, look at captured M3 submachine guns in museums. They are cut up, welded, and modified so heavily that Hyde himself would not have recognized his own children in them. These are not defects. This is life, which soldiers clawed out with their teeth when standard weapons failed them. The factory cocking handle was a thin, ridiculous lever that broke with enviable regularity. Instead of waiting months for spare parts from warehouses, soldiers took a hacksaw, cut a hole straight into the receiver, and welded a piece of steel rod to the bolt. It was ugly, it was dirty, but it worked. The soldier stopped being a consumer and became an engineer, adjusting the tin can to himself right under artillery fire. But let's leave the workshops and return to the main thing. The moment of truth, when elite Wehrmacht units met this trash in confined space. What happened in Meckendorf? SS men burst into a house with MP40s, confident in their elite status. A second later, they were dead. Their vaunted submachine gun, which looks so cool in movies, lost to a pipe assembled from headlights in the very first brutal clash. Close combat is not shooting at targets, it is a test of guts. In narrow rooms and dark corridors, the MP40 turns into an expensive, useless accessory that requires careful handling. In these conditions, the M3 is a butcher's tool. Its slow rate of fire meant that the gun did not jerk in the hands, and each .45 caliber bullet simply tore chunks of flesh away. The Germans, with their high rate of fire in tight spaces, only wasted ammunition, while the grease gun methodically did its dirty work. But the grease gun could do more than roar in the dark. It had a hidden side. It could be terrifyingly quiet. Are you ready to learn how this trash was turned into a weapon of ghosts? OSS agents did not carry suppressed M3s for decoration. This was a weapon for those who were not supposed to leave witnesses. No beautiful stories, just a hole in the enemy's head without a single gunshot sound. The special project to equip the M3 with a suppressor was the height of cynicism. A bulky attachment with wire mesh was screwed onto the barrel, turning the submachine gun into the perfect killer. The suppressor cost more than the weapon itself, but it worked where noise could cost the whole group its life. It was pure function, simple, reliable, and deadly. American Special Forces chose this very piece of iron for their dirtiest operations because they knew the grease gun would not fail at the most critical moment. But the funniest part of this story is that the Germans never found out about it. Why is there not a single word about this nightmare in their documents? The answer will surprise you. The Germans were obsessed with bureaucracy. They recorded every American move, every cartridge type, every tactical trick. But if you dig through the Wehrmacht archives, you will not find a single mention of the grease gun. Do you know why? Because those who were supposed to write the report were already dead. German silence is not a mystery, it is a diagnosis. The German army was too busy with its own agony to discuss the design of American trash. When an elite Wehrmacht unit encountered the grease gun, the scenario was always the same. The submachine gun worked flawlessly, turning their positions into a cemetery. There was no one left to write reports, and those who survived preferred to forget that shame like a nightmare. German headquarters simply could not admit that their doctrine had lost to a piece of stamped iron that cost less than their officers' boots. The war ended. Logically, this submachine gun for the poor should have rotted on a scrap heap alongside broken tanks. But it did not leave. Ahead lay half a century of service that the finest gunsmiths in the world could have envied. 1991, the sands of Kuwait. While global media broadcast footage of the futuristic Desert Storm, where modern tanks equipped with laser sights and electronics worth millions of dollars carried out high-precision hunting. Something contrary to every logic of progress was happening in the shadow of this technological showcase. In the hands of crews from elite Delta Force units operating deep behind enemy lines, the same M3 grease gun appeared. This piece of metal, born in the chaos of the Second World War, had fooled everyone: designers, generals, market analysts, and time itself. How did an artifact from 1942, created as a temporary measure to arm militia forces, manage to outlive dozens of revolutionary systems and reach the era of digital wars? The answer lies in the ruthless honesty of its design. While temperamental elite innovations stuffed with servos and sensitive sensors surrendered to abrasive sand, extreme heat, and the absence of sterile maintenance conditions, the M3 simply kept working. In conditions where any complex mechanism begins to choke on microscopic dust particles, the grease gun felt at home. Delta Force, the elite of the elite, did not disdain to use this trash for one simple reason. When you are dropped hundreds of kilometers from the nearest service center, reliability is worth more than any thermal sight. It was quiet, compact, reliable, and most importantly, predictable. The whole world went mad over high technology, turning weapons into luxury objects, while the M3 remained a tool in the primal sense of the word. It did not demand love, careful handling, or regular lubrication with expensive oils. It simply demanded ammunition. It was the longest, boldest mockery of the entire global arms industry in history. The ending of this story forces us to ask a question. Why do we still blindly believe in the dogma that expensive means better? We are used to linking effectiveness with budget, ignoring the fact that the more complex a system is, the closer it is to its point of failure. The M3 grease gun is not just a submachine gun, it is a historical scam that lasted half a century. It is a monument to engineering cynicism, reminding us that at the moment of truth, when technical failure means death, the most complex algorithms lose to the simplest steel stamping. It is time to summarize this technological scam. We are used to buying comfort, hoping it will transform into power, but reality always brings us back to the beginning. The grease gun is a lesson that true effectiveness is measured not by the number of transistors, but by the system's ability to perform its task when everything else has long since surrendered. Perhaps that is why this piece of pipe still commands respect from those used to relying only on themselves, not on promises from advertising brochures. It was the final triumph of simplicity in a world that, even then, had already begun going insane over complication for complication's sake. True mastery is not the perfect polishing of metal in the sterile conditions of a factory arsenal, where engineers in white coats are afraid to breathe too hard on precision parts. True mastery is the ability to remain deadly where the most elite, heavily advertised systems turn into useless weight. In conditions where automatic mechanisms jam from a single grain of sand, where grease thickens in the cold, and where complex mechanics begin acting up from the slightest impact, another logic takes over. If you still believe that the price tag determines real battlefield effectiveness, look once more at the M3 grease gun. It did not merely survive, it won, defiantly refusing to play by the rules of the elite and high arms fashion. The history of the M3 is a collective slap in the face to the entire military doctrine of the mid-20th century. It was a spit in the face of the aristocracy of arms making. American soldiers never loved this design. They did not have the touching attachment to it that they felt, for example, toward the reliable Garand. They treated the grease gun with absolute, even cynical practicality. Like a wrench, a sledgehammer, or a rusty shovel. It was a tool that could be thrown into mud, run over by a Sherman's tracks, and a second later open fire. It was precisely this complete absence of emotional attachment, this utilitarian nature, that made it a legend. The grease gun proved a simple, brutal truth. In a world where survival is at stake, victory goes not to the one that costs a fortune or dazzles the imagination with elegant lines, but to the one that requires no care, asks for no tenderness, and is ready to work as long as there are cartridges left in the magazine. We are used to romanticizing weapons, turning them into fetishes. We admire complex mechanisms where every part is fitted with micron-level precision. But war is not a parade. War is entropy, and in that entropy, the M3 was king, because it was primitive enough to be invulnerable. While other submachine guns required cleaning after every march, the grease gun kept spitting lead, ignoring dust, moisture, and the careless attitude of its owner. Today's methods of war are an endless, exhausting race for even more complex, even more expensive, and therefore even more vulnerable technologies. Modern arms corporations create systems that fear even a scratch, let alone the reality of trench life. It seems history has taught them nothing. We are still building elite complexes that surrender to ordinary mud, forgetting that on the front line, the winner is always the one holding a reliable tool, simple as a piece of pipe. The grease gun has gone into history, but its philosophy remains the only correct answer to the question of survival. If the glossy pathos of official textbooks disgusts you, and you want to know how technology truly changed the course of history, welcome. Subscribe to the channel. Here we dig up the truth military historians prefer to keep silent about and take iron apart piece by piece to understand why the simple always turns out stronger than the complex.